Bonjour à tous.
Hello everyone, I'm Thibault L'Espagnol. I'm a deputy delegate for the civil society in partnership with local civil society. Thank you to Convergence for the opportunity of this roundtable. We want to thank our panelists as well, and thank you all. I'm sure there are many other things, billions of other things you could do on a sunny day in Paris, but thank you for being here. The purpose of this roundtable is really, we actually had two purposes. One was after the launch of the law for fighting against inequalities, a law that highlights the place of partnerships between France and civil society organizations in beneficiary countries. So we want to touch base to see where we're at, what's new, what's up. Following this new law, our second objective was really to have a discussion between our panelists and also with you in the audience to talk about the way this partnership is functioning, to make it simple between the North and the South with the French Agency of Development. And you will hear about the various innovations, and we can discuss with you what are the best practices, where we can still improve things in order to improve our partnership. And our approach is one to really take stock of, and we will listen to two funders, the French Agency of Development and Expertise France. You will also hear from a point of view of a civil society of one country, beneficiary country in Tunisia, and also you will hear some feedback from one NGO, French NGO, working in partnership with the civil society locally. So now we have Valérie Huguenin to my left. She's Deputy Division Manager of the CSO Partnerships Department. We also have Roméo Morabin, Incubation Program Manager, LABES. He will tell us a bit more about this. We also have Eric Fleutelot, who is Technical Director at the Health Department Major Pandemics Unit at Expertise France. And we also have Olivier Lemasson and Flora Benchekroun, Project Officer and Executive Director of the GRDR, and they will tell us about their approach to partnership and a new program that will be launched soon in Mauritania. So we will have a panel in two parts. The first part will be more like a roundtable with some brief presentations from our panelists, and then the other half will be a time of exchange and discussion with you to hear from your own experiences, to also answer questions if you have any. This is the program for this afternoon. Let's start now with Valérie Huguenin. One of the innovations of the law which I just mentioned, this law of August 21st, is a OSC initiative, which is an opening to organizations coming from beneficiary countries. So we are working hard at this. I know that we already have some feedback on how it went, what new development this brought, and what are the consequences for the future. Thank you, Thibault. Just to give you a quick overview of this device, I'm going to talk to you about the novelties as part of this new law. So this apparatus is a new scheme, OSC, CSO, which was implemented in the past at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It has evolved since 2009. This was a scheme which aims at supporting initiatives from the CSO in France until very recently, in partnership with their partners in the various countries, whatever the partnership, be it formal or informal, through larger or smaller organizations. So we have worked on this scheme for several years, several decades even, and we have encouraged this strong partnership between the French CSO and the local CSO in order to strengthen the CSO in the beneficiary countries, but also in order to support the French civil society, which is playing an important role, as you know, for the development and to help French citizens to join and to be mobilized and to help with development. So this law of 2021, through this law, we were able to support directly local associations. So therefore, we have been able to introduce this new law this year for our 2022 projects which will be funded and implemented in 2023. And we have reserved a portfolio for these local CSOs. We have been thinking at great lengths as to the way to work with local CSO, which one. There are millions and billions even of CSO. We are very small as a organization, so we could not meet all the requests from local CSO. Therefore, we had to put some criteria, very hard criteria for our first experience. Therefore, we proposed to the local organization, which had been supported in the past by French NGOs, to present a request for funding. This was a test year for us. We did not really know how things were going to go, whether the local NGO would have the information. Of course, we communicated at large through the French Association, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc. And in the end, we had about 45 requests for funding of projects with local CSOs. And we kept 34, we pre-selected 34 for an amount of 18 million euros. Now the NGOs have been informed of the pre-selection, and they will now put forward their demand for funding. So we are expecting now and looking forward to hearing back from them to hear what these projects are and to be able to dialogue directly with them. Some continue to dialogue with their own French partners, which is something which we encouraged. We were not here to oppose to the French NGOs, to say that we were only going to be working with the local NGOs. This was not our approach, but we wanted to talk to look at the local opportunities and to see how they had matured enough to be able to be supported in their initiative, that maybe it would be the right time for them to continue carrying their own projects and to ask the partners to remain partners. And this was the decision of the local CSO. They made the decision to continue with their French partners or not. And we had some very good feedback, especially in the African countries. We had a few projects also in Asia. We had a few projects on the field, but also some projects in the countries, for example, in Burkina Faso. So for the time being, we are really pleased with this first experience. We will take about 1 year to take it further, to go deeper into the discussions and see how we need to adjust our schemes, how to continue to encourage our partnerships with the French CSO. As you know, the challenges which we are facing for funders, civil societies are huge and very complicated. Things are getting more and more complicated. So we all need to work together to meet those challenges. So the challenge here is really to find the right balance and to have added value as much as possible. As funders, French CSO, of course, have added value. And this is a specificity which is needed. We are also paying attention to innovation. Of course, innovation does not just come from the north. North influences the south, and the south is also influencing the north. Just to make it simple, if you like. So we are seeing that the French association world and its partners has changed greatly over the last few years. GRDR has some interesting practices, and they know this very well. We've seen some changes over the last 20 years or so, with some major challenges now. So it's up to us as funders and institutions to see how we can support this, where we can bring support, financial support, to help with those initiatives. The purpose, of course, is to be able to meet the SDGs, to be as efficient as possible, to be answerable to all of these SDGs. So this has been a good experience for us. Just to say that the French Development Agency did not wait this new law to do this, because we have been doing this for some years now. We were able to finance directly some local NGOs, but now we have a new dimension and we're able to apply new structures, and this is a great delight for us. This new scheme to the CSO of the beneficiary countries was not initially part of the government project. This is something which was added afterwards by the Parliament, which requested a great reactivity from the French Development Agency. We're talking here about some important projects with some subsidies of several millions, even billions euros, or several million euros at least. The subsidies and the partnerships also go through the embassies in order to get direct support for local CSO. We are talking about some important amount here. Just to illustrate this new scheme, just to give you one example from Labes, who experienced really at first hand what Valérie was just talking about with the direct financing, and Romeo Morabin will tell us more about it. What has been the relationship between an organization from the south and French funders? Indeed, for Labes, which I'm going to talk about in a few moments, it's a great opportunity to be able to access to this kind of funding. Labes is a great illustration of international and French funding for a southern structure. We have benefited from all kinds of fundings. There are so many, for example, small subsidies at first through the French Institute of Tunis, and then a direct fund which helped us to deploy an activity which has been running now for 10 years. Through a partnership between Labes and France, and also some contracts for some activities and others. But recently we had a direct funding for the second part of Salem. Salem meaning hello in the Arabic language, but it's also an association that is there to help civil societies beyond the borders of Tunisia. Labes has three main axes. First of all, supporting and accompanying anyone who is innovating for social added value. It's also funding for through direct subsidies, and more recently we also have another scheme which is really a source of pride for us in Tunisia. We have been able to stabilize our actions, which is a loan of honor, a 0% rate loan in order to support entrepreneurs. And this is a way to also accompany these entrepreneurs in the long run. A third axis, which is also very important, is the raising awareness part, which is very important in Tunisia. For example, 10 years ago, when the revolution started in Tunisia and led to a wave of instability, social, economic issues was something that was not heard of or was not talked about. So thanks to a huge amount of work of the local association and the funders and the various structures, this has changed. So Labes at the moment, through various fundings, and mainly through this last funding, which will enable us and in 2023 to move upward and to change gear. So we will become more of a reference association, and locally, regionally, we are able also to take action. we will be able to support once again various structures which are working and supporting also local associations. So we will have even more beneficiaries, and this will become possible in 4 countries, and this is a huge challenge for us at Labes. This is also a greater financial responsibility with a larger budget, but it shows that through a logic of structuring financing, it is possible to offer the possibility to local structures to materialize or to enable a more local anchorage. Labes has deployed and will continue to deploy various partnerships, be it in Tunisia or beyond, in order to implement a logic of development, not so much on a project logic for 2 or 3 years, and then you wait for the next call for proposals. Here, the Labes really has the opportunity through its management, through the trust of its partners, to actually implement a deep change and to implement a sustainable change also with public powers, public authorities, like the loan of honor, which did not exist before, and this is something that is very important to us. Another aspect that is important and that is made possible now is that we will now choose quality of support rather than the quantity of support. We want to also raise awareness through conferences, through masterclasses is a good thing, but supporting maybe 30 or 40 entrepreneurs in the long run, being able to measure their impact, this is something that is really exceptional for us. In that way, we're able to have local champions who in turn will be able to influence and have a greater impact. We will have an impact on the beneficiaries of the beneficiaries. What else could I say? What were the other points which I wanted to highlight? Yes, another important point, and specifically in the Tunisian context, this country is not yet aware enough on issues of such as preserving the environment. I'm talking about social environment through education, through public education and private education, but also talking about the vegetal and animal environment with terrible pollution, which you can see with your own eyes, which continues to grow, and waste management, which still is still being done in the short term. There's a lot of waste still waiting in the streets, so there are many challenges. So Labes is really trying to position itself on an environmental axis with its beneficiaries in order to tackle these issues, in order to improve the condition of living and the quality of life of the populations, and to be able to look to the future. This is really what Tunisia needs at the moment. So if I was to talk a bit more about the relationship between Labes and the associations from the south, in their partnership or in their relationship with their partnerships, I would say thank you, because it's very difficult to benefit from funding. So there are only a few organizations already in place, but for those who would like to raise new initiatives such as social innovation, it's a huge opportunity. Without these external fundings, of course, we would not even be in a position to exist. Yet there are still many issues on which we can still make headways. First of all, the Labes had and still has the opportunity to sustain some of its activities, but too often call for projects and proposals, encourage people to develop new activities, but do not help them to cover their structural costs or to finance the existing activities, which is why, as part of our support what we are trying to do. More than trying, actually, what we're actually doing is that we are working on implementing activities which can generate some income in order to be more autonomous. And this is in connection with the project mode. I don't know if this is the right expression, to have this project vision on a period of 2 to 3 years, maybe 6 years, and then stop there. So this is part of the main topics, I think, which will need to be improved in the future. But on behalf of the LABES, what I can say for them now is really thank you for being able to benefit from all these fundings. And what we want to do is to continue to work in the Maghreb region and to continue to boost the ecosystem. Thank you, Romeo. Romeo is a great example of the partnership between France and the beneficiary countries, not only through the financial flow. As you can see, Romeo is not from Tunisia originally, yet he's working for a Tunisian organization as part of a civic service, I think at first, which could lead then to someone staying in the south and work in a southern structure in order to facilitate these exchanges. The GRDR can also talk about this. Of course, money is the core of all things, but it's not just about money. It's also about human relationships. You mentioned the Salem project, which was financed by the French Development Agency. And we could talk about those various projects, but the classic way to do this was to have a state operator or a French organization used to work with a project and to do funding. And we could have done it that way, but we decided to work with a local partner from a beneficiary country, and it was not necessarily beneficial in that it was not necessarily cheaper to go through a local structure. Yet, all the money, all the income, all the expertise, the know-how remained actually be it in Tunisia, Mauritania. So these structures that have been identified by LABES will be used as local partners, and we were able to say that we were able to finance a project, but yet this project was steered by local organizations. So this is a risk-taking approach, but yet this is an important step for LABES. We took some risks, of course, because we know it is not easy for civil society in the beneficiary countries to work with local structures and to receive international funds, and we are seeing a situation in Tunisia that is a bit worrying. Of course, the advantage with LABES is that they were able to visit places and give us some feedback. So there is some risk-taking, but yet we take note of the fact that we should stop being obsessed by simply projects and financing projects, because we need to be able to look more in the long run. I think Valérie and ourselves really is something that we are fighting against, to come out of the all project approach. We need to be able to work with people in the long run and not just to chase projects for the sake of projects. So this was a good point. Thank you. And we will talk about this as a conclusion. This is part of the challenges. Maybe we can now move on to another funder, not to talk not just simply about finances, but also to talk about expertise and skills. Eric from Expertise France will talk about one of their schemes. Unfortunately, he will not be able to stay with us during the whole time of the session because he has another commitment. But thank you for being here with us. Thank you for inviting me. Expertise France is an operator of the French ministries. Personally, I'm working mainly with the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs. We have many collaborations. It's not just with NGOs, but it's much wider, much broader than that. We are working on all kinds of issues. But here, we thought it would be interesting to talk with you about the various achievements over the last 10 years with various initiatives for AIDS, for malaria, tuberculosis, to fight against these three diseases. France every year has been contributing to this fund, and part of this amount does not go to the fund but to Expertise France for this initiative for fighting against these three diseases. And we do this in an approach that is quite original. This is a mixed or plural management. There are other members in the steering committee also making decisions, members representing civil society, people from the research field, from the academic world, and several others. I always forget a few, but it's a mixed steering committee. Having said this, our support as Expertise France for actors based in France or based in eligible countries which are beneficiaries, about 40 of them, we bring technical assistance at their request, and we bring fundings also via a call for projects. The technical assistance does not benefit the CSO that much, probably less than 10% of the technical assistance which we carry out in those 40 countries. However, for call for projects, 90% of the funding via the call for projects actually go to civil society actions. And if we look inside the 90%, one-third for CSO, which are based in the beneficiary countries, one-third for CSO based in France, and one-third of other organizations which are neither French NGOs or CSO, but other actors, private companies, non-profitable private companies, also research institutes which are private with non-profitable, which are also funded by us. So we have a makeup of 3/3, if you like, from the start of the initiative for organizations based in the region. If we look at the financial volumes, we can see a main difference. In a nutshell, on average, the subsidies are more important where they're given to French NGOs than when they are given to NGOs beneficiaries. For us, this has a significant. There are countries which are more in the north than in the south. I'm very happy, actually, to see that we were able to make some investments in the Ukraine, that we were able to amplify these investments since the beginning of the war. So on average, subsidies are smaller, which raises the question, because these are some requests and we're not so used to cutting our subsidies. What we are seeing is that there is more modesty in the request from the countries, the beneficiary countries, versus the French organization. Another important aspect is that the purpose of the projects also is different. I'm talking here about financing projects, and then I will talk about what we do elsewhere. Indeed, we are taking some risks. For example, when we are targeting some communities and populations, so we're really adding to what is already done. We are helping or adding to what local governments or states have not been able to do or have not done. So we are we prefer to support a project implemented by a local CSO. And I could give you other examples concerning malaria or tuberculosis. However, we don't really completely do our job, and I'm very proud of what we're doing, but it's not perfect in that. We would also need to support this even some more with some technical assistance in order to build up the CSO in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, or in Southeast Asia, or in the Indian Ocean, or in the Caribbean. Why? Because they could ask for more funding either to the French Development Agency or to us, and they could also obtain more subsidies. And there is more and more funds which is targeted for CSO in the multilateral financings, be it the Global Fund, but it is also true for the World Bank and other. There is one hole, however. We have managed to show and to prove that it was possible to directly finance CSO in the beneficiary countries, that the French NGOs never work alone, but always in partnership with other organizations, that they implement multi-country projects and not just in their own countries. And I think this is really interesting. We have a great example in Madagascar, where we were able to release something that was really blocking. I'm not going to go into details here. This was regarding medical tests, and we were able to do this in partnership with a local or neighborhood country and not with a French intervention. So this kind of partnership with neighboring countries is also very interesting. There is a lack indeed. In order to continue to finance the fight against tuberculosis, we have to ask for at least 500 million euros for a minimum of 24 months. So the smaller structures often do not have access to our support. They may have access to our technical assistance, but not so much to our financial support. So we have to put some structure in place that would not just be a financial flow. There will be a diagnosis. Then there will be some fundings outside of projects, and then we will finance whatever others do not want to finance. For example, electricity, access to internet, etc. So everything else that traditional funders do not like to fund, we try to finance ourselves. And then we also add technical assistance to this, depending on the people's requests and depending on the original diagnosis, which will be done either on the financial management or on other aspects. We do not manage in the same way. It's like at home. We do not manage in the same way 40,000 or 40 million euros. It's a different story. So we need to be able to adjust to build up these organizations. This is what we have already done with 2 or 3 great success stories where we've seen one, for example, in Mali, which became a beneficiary of some fundings, tens of millions of dollars, instead of this money being given to a UN agency, which is really a source of great joy for me, because this is our purpose here. Our objective is to let organizations be beneficiaries of this fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And there are indeed success stories, which makes me think of the decision made within the initiative. There is an issue of a partnership within the CSO initiative. It's not only Valerie and I making the decisions. Valerie, Yes, the CSO initiative from the AFD, the French Development Agency, is a well-oiled mechanism. There is a whole team behind it, talking with associations and ensuring the follow-up. I didn't take much time telling you about this mechanism, but of course we support people as much as we can, and there is a decision-making process within a steering committee, and they gather several times a year, and the France Foundation is there. There is a representative of company work council as well, and other players. We often have a very long debate, and then we allocate funds to French associations and soon local associations. So this is all very much controlled. Moderator, thank you for this answer. So, of course, we are not only dealing with flows, financial flows, but with partnerships. So we will now hear from Flora at the GRDR and her work with local people, local partnerships, because, of course, there is not only the civil society, but local authorities that you need to work with. And then we will hear about what can be done in Mauritania through a multi-stakeholder project. So first Olivier and then Flora. Olivier, I am the Executive Director of GRDR. We'd rather focus on migration, citizenship, and development. So we'll try to tell you about partnerships within the context of GRDR, and then Flora, the project officer for Mauritania, will tell you more about the project that is about to be launched. So let me try to be brief. The GRDR has been operating for over 50 years, and we exist because of agricultural engineers who came back from sub-Saharan Africa to France and met with migrants from different African countries who had come to France to find a job, and they had been called by France. And the engineers told them, you have ideas and we want to make those ideas a reality. So we are here, that's what we do at GRDR. We are here, but we want to do things in Africa. So we are dealing with issues like access to rights. 25% of our activity happens in France, and then we also deal with development issues, having access to basic products, etc. So we have been working in Africa for 50 years. We work in Mauritania, in Senegal, in Mali. And everywhere we have people involved locally. We have an associative basis locally. And there is a solidarity. It stems from the French public law from 1901. So when we are here, we are seen as an international NGO, but when we are there, we are seen differently. At the end, the discussion that we have had with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs led to the question, what is your exit strategy and what is the end of the project? And we said that we didn't have an exit strategy because we are present there with employees there. So we are willing to be players in the field. So for the past 20 years, the challenge has been to strengthen this partnership locally and claim this southern dimension of GRDR. There are no longer GRDR from the north, GRDR from the south, because we are both. And our second specificity is this strong relationship with local stakeholders. With this 50-year-long legacy, we know the challenges well locally, and we know that we need to continue our efforts working with a whole web of multi-stakeholders. And Flora will tell you more about this, giving you the example of Mauritania. We are not only working with CSOs, we have CSO federations, NGO gatherings, and the strength of GRDR is to put everyone around the table to discuss development issues. But of course, our partnerships and our relationship can remain fraught because there are difficulties. You might have heard of the initiative group. It gathers 13 technical NGOs for development, and we capitalize together about partnerships. So you should read this report. It's on the GRDR website or on the initiative website. And there is kind of a toolbox with it. And it helps you think of how to assess a partnership, how to make it long-term, locally. And by moving forward, we often have to deal with a consortium of NGOs with large budgets. A few years ago, when we had 3 million euros, it was a great deal. Now we are reaching 50 million euros. And the latest work of initiative is called Relevant Tools or High Risk Traps. And the GRDR is part of the steering committee we mentioned earlier. So this issue of partnerships makes us think of local network and how it is drawn up. How can we work with one another? How can we bring something to another institution and the other way around? So remember that we need to be complementary locally. Thank you, Olivier. Flora needs to have the floor as well. No, I will yield the floor to her. Are you sure? So the last thing I wanted to add is the following. When you start thinking of North-South partnerships, Valérie mentioned it, this is totally obsolete to entitle this North-South partnership. Well, we need to realize that it's hard to cooperate. So the challenge of the GRDR is to put forward the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as universal goals. So thinking of water here or there is easier here, at least on paper, because as a migrant here, you are only observing what's happening back in your home country. But the SDGs are cooperation drivers. The PCPR in Mauritania is a good example of how to think of challenges here and there. So always remember where you come from and what your ability to take action is here or there. Flora. So to conclude, my name is Flora Benchikroon. I'm the project officer of Mauritania and Europe for the GRDR. So of course, dealing with partnerships means dealing with migration and space management. So this is why we mentioned being here and there. So I will tell you of the PCPR, the multi-stakeholder partnership. So we are working along with the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs to work here and there. So we'll zoom in onto Mauritania. And talking about European and local stakeholder. In Northern Africa, we are using actually mechanisms that have been used for years. So the idea of a multi-stakeholder partnership is to see how we can build a program and initiatives by cooperating with different stakeholders. So of course we need to focus on reaching the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. So as part of our program called Seeds for Citizenship. So we are working here and there with Europe and Mauritania. And we try to see how we can promote youth in the public space. So let me tell you about our methodology. How do we work in a multi-stakeholder partnership? So first we need to have a robust consortium. So in the case of Europe, Mauritania, we need such a strong multi-stakeholder consortium. So first we will need to work with City Hall, for example. We have been working with the Region Center in France in cooperation with the Golgo region in Mauritania. We also insist on working with the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs and the AFD, but also with NGOs in Europe, like the Secours Catholique, etc., legacy partners. So they already have this double space dimension. They work here and there with local partners. And then we try to see how we can find common ground to take action. Alone, you go fast, but together we go further. So what's also interesting is that we work with a diversity of stakeholders in Mauritania, 30 of them. We are starting to launch this project in Mauritania. And we're focusing on youth issues. So civil society is working on different issues like gender equality, sustainable development, the green transition, and many other issues that are of concern, the Sahel, for instance. And we are trying to see how we can involve this active youth for tomorrow, for the future. 60% of young people are part of this adventure. So these are the challenges we need to bear in mind. And the idea is also to talk about funding possibilities. And on top of entering into a dialogue, we need to reinforce the different stakeholders with chain funding. The idea is to support, help to associations so that they can boost their own activity. And the idea is to also educate, teach. How can we learn from one another? How can we teach them to manage those funds? The GRDR is one decision maker, but not the sole one. We need to think this through together. How can we implement actions collectively? So, of course, this is a challenge to rise to. We need to create a governance model to see how we can disseminate and distribute funds, especially when we're dealing with monetary issues. We can create fraught relationships. So how can we avoid those fraught relationships? What are the methods that we can use to prevent such conflicts from happening? And through such a program, we can move forward along those lines. And finally, the project is quite overarching, but I mentioned city halls, regions. So here we are trying to work on different scales. So first, starting from the local level and with development stakeholders. Sometimes we often forget about mayors and elected representatives at the local level. So how can we involve them in this national dimension? Because this project is a national one for the whole of Mauritania. So how can we include this local scale? How can we bring it up to the national level? And we can have advocacy and other initiatives for it to move forward. So we need to make sure that all stakeholders are involved, taking part in this project, and make sure we enter in a common dialogue to have to reach shared results. And this is a new culture that we're trying to implementing there. Moderator, thank you, Flora. Thank you, Olivier. To be clearer, in 2023, this will be a very important year for Mauritania. We will launch this multi-stakeholder project in Mauritania, and we will have also the action of international experts. So we also have a Mauritanian government body trying to help the government work with civil society, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs will be funding this project, and Expertise France will also be involved. We mentioned this multi-stakeholder project in Mauritania. It will also be working on government dimensions to help them see civil society not as a threat, but as a partner in implementing public policy. So we are trying to combine different tools, also with the Salem project. So I think we are okay when it comes to time constraints. So if you have questions or you want to give us feedback, do not hesitate. You now have the floor. I think that we have a mic going over the room. So please raise your hand if you have a question. I think there's a question at the back of the room. You had a question? Right? Question. Thank you very much for this panel. I have a question for the AFD. When it comes to calls for projects, we often notice that the amounts at stake are very high. They are supposed to be allocated to the civil society, like in Chad, for instance. And this project was looking at 22 million euros. And as Mr. Flotelo said it, you've implemented different tools for lower amounts to be allocated to civil society. We work a lot with local partners, and that is their concern. These issues are quite frequent. With Education Cannot Wait, for instance, we are under conditions that does not enable the civil society to submit proposals. So are you aware of such challenges? That is my question. And do you have any other tools to help remediate this in the future? answer. Yes, this is a question we are asked very often. At the AFD, there are many different tools in place. The AFD has called for tenders to implement large-scale projects like the project in Chad, as you mentioned. Of course, we're dealing with highly qualified NGOs that work as part of a consortium to rise to those financial challenges to implement those projects. And then there are many other funding tools. And of course, this is for any other type of NGOs. The tool that I'm dealing with, the SCO initiative, is dealing with projects that last for 3 years for a budget of 300,000 euros, so about 100,000 per year and several million sometimes. And the recent tool that was put in place to support initiatives for South feminist organizations, the SOF, is dealing with small NGOs. You also have the French embassies that have the FSBE, the PISCA solutions. Expertise France also has other tools, funding tools. So depending on the nature of your project and what you wish to finance, there are different tools. In the Sahel, you need large-scale solutions because the challenges are huge, large-scale, and so we need to have a strong impact, but it's important to underline it. You are right. There are also smaller-scale stakeholders with a strong impact locally. So let me reassure you, AFD does not only fund high-profile projects of 20 million euros. We also adjust our funding to the different needs of the different projects. And of course, we are working hand in hand with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to see how we can adjust those. Moderator. Within the SCO initiative, there is a chain system. The AFD funds the forum that supports the work of migration NGOs. There is also the tool of micro-projects that helps chain funding. We also have internal discussions when it comes to micro-projects, their actual cost in the field, depending on the needs. It's not always easy. We know that there is a need from the association web for micro projects, but of course we need to think in terms of cost and benefits, and we need to support the civil society, NGOs in the actual countries where help is needed. I think there is another question in the audience. I have one reaction to solidarity economy. I work for an association in the Côte d'Ivoire. So the economy, the social and solidarity economy has no point in our country. You've mentioned it several times earlier. Certain projects are being funded. So there are funds coming from France, and that's what the youth is expecting. And the latest young person that I work with came from an AFD project within a lab, and they were trying to create bricks using plastic waste. And these young people were trained. That was great. And after, they were just left behind. They didn't have the budget to buy the equipment they needed to actually manufacture the bricks. So this is a problem for me to hear that you're working on social economy and solidarity. The first association working for social economy and solidarity that was in the 80s, but it doesn't exist in our country. So we are glad to see funds coming in, but then we know that those solutions are not long-term because there are no existing mechanisms. And in my country, we are not entitled to create an economic business. You have to be part of a cooperative. So this was my contribution.
Thank you for your testimony. We are trying to work on this at two levels. First of all, we are trying to let this model be recognized. There should be a resolution at the UN. I'm not a specialist, but yes, I cannot say too much about it. But then secondly, there's also the need. There's probably less of a need for subsidies and for loans, and also for a market. If this would give way, maybe Romeo, who is working in Tunisia, I don't know if you have the same issues. Are there similar issues, for example, in Côte d'Ivoire? I don't know if we have the same issues in Tunisia and in the Côte d'Ivoire. However, what is sure, and that's one of the main challenge that we are facing, in 2020, a decree was voted in Tunisia according to the four main principles, which we are still expecting to be implemented despite the lack of legal framework. The various stakeholders, and you said it rightly, various structures such as cooperative and others, with an agricultural aspect to it, it's still possible to support actors of solidarity and social economy, or just simply even people who are trying to do things or take actions for the common good. And I was talking about your project, actually, giving training, giving tools without the possibility to implement them. Is this a true answer? Is this really meeting the needs? Is this giving people the opportunity to go further later on? Then the answer, of course, is no. That's why we need to do a lot of raising awareness on certain issues. And we need to develop structures, infrastructures to enable the implementation of solutions, and also to enable the support of entrepreneurs who will be able to use these infrastructures. I totally agree with you. There is a need for legal representativity, but there's also a need to bring these topics through various ways, maybe in the first to start with. Maybe just to add to, Valérie, would you like to add to what has been said? Yes, I'm very sensitive to what you just said. I've often asked myself the same question. In the Maghreb, I've been working there for some years since the revolution. We have invested a lot, funders, CSO institutions, etc. We've invested at great lengths for the youth, to give the youth some future, to develop activities. When I was visiting such projects in the Maghreb, I thought to myself, this is great, we are training them, they're very dynamic, but how long are we going to do this? How are they going to develop their activities in the long run? How long are we going to help them? And I understand your question. I can understand why you are putting this forward. Training young people is good, but if we are not concerned about the future and what will happen to them after the training sessions, many NGOs, of course, are raising this question and are looking at the two aspects of this issue. But I'm sure we still have some failures, and we still have some impact that are still too little. I'm very sensitive to what you just said. The ESS.
À l'AFD et au ministère.
Okay, this is something that we're very sensitive to, and we're launching with the ministry an in-depth study to find out what are the actors of the social and solidarity-based economy, who are there, what kind of results. and who are the actors of the ESS. I have many examples of ESS members whom we supported in Western Africa, in Morocco. There are many various actors with different status, different cooperatives in countries where there is an ESS policy, in other countries where this is not existing. There is competition. There is even sometimes a mistrust toward the civil society actors. So it's difficult, actually. So we cannot move forward without reassuring people and without supporting local stakeholders. So this study will really enlighten us to show what needs to be done, whom we should support, with what kind of mechanism. This is a very interesting topic. And I should say that at the AFD, French Development Agency, we did launch a great policy of social business. We were expecting a lot from that policy, especially to support actors from different levels, be it field actors and then actors who were growing, who needed a different kind of support. And I have to say that the AFD did not keep its promises. But through this study and this reflection, I hope that the AFD will be able to reposition itself on the issue of social business and solidarity economy, and to have a multi-level response to meet the various expectations. Any other comments or testimonies or questions from your own experiences? Yes, please, you have the floor, sir. Hello, I'm Romain, in charge of training at Action contre la faim, Action Against Hunger. Thank you for your presentations, which echo what I am experiencing. I have a question for Mr. Flutlo. You talked about capacity building. You talked about the organizational support. Do you think that I wanted to ask you about the fact that there are great women and men behind those great organizations, and I want to ask you about the relationship and your role within that framework. Okay. We have to make a distinction between capacity building of individuals and capacity building of organizations. I don't think we can build up organizations if we are not able to build up individuals. And you're right, we are not talking about this enough. We should all be condemned to showing the most stupid projects which we did in the past or supported in the past. And I include all of us. It's a collective us. It's easy to say that the funders funded just anything. We all make mistakes in the world of development, but we should not be ashamed of it. It is as we look to our mistakes and point to our mistake that we stop repeating them. This is my optimistic side. My pessimistic side, I have the feeling that we have been doing this over and over again. But just to come back to your question, there is a multiple challenge there in a domino effect. No country, in most of the countries where I've been working in, historically speaking, that has been so happy to see a CSO being strengthened and being in a position to complete what has been done by the state and what the international organizations have done. Very sincerely, I should be able to spontaneously state one, but out of the 40, maybe just 5 would meet this criteria. Most of them are very reluctant to the development of the CSO and what they could do with the money that has been given by the Fund for Social and Development, be it multilateral or not. So it's very difficult to work in these conditions, to build up these organizations and to entrust them with services, with health services, for example. This is a field that I'm more familiar with, but it could be also other areas. because the authorities will feel endangered, they would feel at risk and in competition. I can still remember hearing what a high official was saying in Western Africa. They were saying, I don't understand what these CSO are doing. Health is our business. This is my responsibility as a ministry, as a minister of health, yes, but look at your indicators. Look at your health indicators. Look at your infant mortality. Thank God there are other actors involved. So we have no doubt as to the necessity of having CSO. We know we will not reach the SDGs in 2030. We will not reach these goals if we do not have a strong mobilization of the civil society. So organizations have to be strengthened, we will need to find men and women who will be in a position to build up their capacities, but also to be loyal. If I'm saying this, I don't know about other areas, but in the health area, for example, we have a program which we are running with the AFD to train epidemiologists. For example, if you are doing an epidemic study, we are bringing along epidemiologists from Europe or from the States. We want to train more epidemiologists in Western Africa, but what I'm concerned about is that once they have the same level of those who have been trained in Harvard, in Bordeaux, I'm afraid, I'm concerned that the WHO would be epic. So it's obvious, because between a salary of $12,000 a month and a salary of $400 or $800 a month as epidemiologist, you see the difference. So strengthening capacities, building up skills, yes, is a good thing, but yet work is a market. We can be for or against a market. This is a fact. We cannot stop someone. I received this morning a resignation from a worker in Burkina Faso. I cannot stop this. I cannot prevent this. This is the way it goes. So if we do not act through our finances, through our fundings, be it for projects or outside of projects, to the funding of human resources, we will not keep our people. And if we do not do that, then we will have to train people, and in 3 years' time, we have to do it all over again. Sorry if this was not the answer you were expected, but this is my main concern at the moment. We can finance training as much as we want, but keeping and maintaining people on the ground is another story. Can I just add something else, and then I will have to go? What I said about governments who are looking with a bad eye the development of CSOs, other governments are even going further. They're actually stopping and blocking the expansion of CSOs. In some cases, in some countries, it is not possible to sign a financing convention without the approval of a ministry. There is a control that is being stronger. You know, this issue of foreign financing and what this is doing to Russian NGOs. But this is something which we are seeing a lot more now in many other countries, especially in countries which are so-called democracies. For example, in India, we have a similar issue in some countries in Africa. We are seeing a buildup of a control of finances. And if we knock at the door, it's for a good reason, because if people manage to stop the funding, then things will not happen. So this is indeed a challenge which we have been facing from 2017 to 2022. We've seen a doubling, going through CSOs being French or foreign. In some countries, we have been facing impossibilities or great difficulties to simply do bank wires in order to finance CSO activities. We should almost come back to the old system of traveling with some suitcases filled with banknotes. So this is part of the challenges when we are seeing some signals regarding some laws that are implemented to make things more difficult for CSO. We are working on this. Thank you, Eric, for your input. I don't know if Olivier or Flora would like to add something about the training of the staff in Mauritania or in other countries. How do you manage this on a daily basis? How do you manage the risk of brain fleeing? Do you have any concrete example or good practices to share with us? No good practices really, but there is a fear which we are facing. What Eric was mentioning, we are facing every day. Once our teams have been trained, they can be then leaving to go to work with the Red Cross or the AFD and so on. So unfortunately, this has been our experience. We are considered as a school, as a training center. So in a sense, we are satisfied with this. People come and stay with us on not some leave. So our criteria is to expand the time when people stay in the school. The average time was 2 years. Now we are more around 5 years time. So people are staying a bit longer and people enjoy being there and stay a bit longer. Unfortunately, I don't have any best practices to share with you, except that I am convinced that NGOs have to be a school also for training. We have time for 1 or 2 comments or questions or testimonies from the audience.
Oui. Attendez, prenez le micro, sinon les gens connectés à distance ne pourront pas vous entendre.
Please speak in the mic. Thank you. I just wanted to react to what has just been said. I did a study for a minister in the Côte d'Ivoire. We had a similar issue. CSO are actually keeping the best skills within the ministries. So it's an endless chain, if you like. I spent about 1.5 years training people within ministries. After they finished their training, they left to go and work with CSO in Belgium, in France, and others to get better offers. I think this is a strategic issue which has to be developed. It's a real strategic issue that we need to look at, and we need my logic for working is to work locally. Brain drain. I did not hear about the prefecture link, which is an important link as well. So this brain drain or skill leakage is something that needs to be taken heartedly. I don't know if Romeo would like to share a testimony about Tunisia. We heard recently about the way that the law has been evolving in Tunisia. In your own experience, would you say that things have become more complicated or not quite yet? Are you talking about the issue of the transmission of know-how, or more generally speaking? Okay, I could also react to the previous comment, but let me just answer your question first. Yes and no. I think Tunisia has always been a place that is going between being open and being closed. At times things are going well, at times things are not going so well. Just to give you an example, we helped a beneficiary who took part in a contest. Everyone was happy. He showed his activities. He got a reward or a promise of a prize. Unfortunately, a week later, the government decided to close all foreign or American funding. So apparently 3 weeks ago, this door was reopened. So yes, there are some complicated situations to manage, yet this is not something that has impacted us on a daily basis. In Tunisia, however, what's interesting is that we don't work as in a civil organization. We do not work much with civil public powers, rather. They are mainly focused on their own issues. but globally speaking, it's going well. We are never at risk, especially with the latest developments. We are not at risk of some sudden changes that might impact our activity directly or not. At the moment, things are pretty quiet. However, the activities of our final beneficiaries is not so stable when it comes to benefiting from foreign subsidies, or also when it comes to getting visas, etc. This is not something that is stable. There was something that I just wanted to mention regarding the transmission of know-how and expertise. Globally speaking, all of the structures in the civil society, and I'm a good example of this, be it with France or with other countries. I joined Labes as part of a civic service, and I moved on to another type of contract. But my personal objective was never to become a permanent member of Labes. I was here to bring my own expertise, my own know-how, which I'm just communicating to local teams on a daily basis. I'm teaching some methodology. I'm giving them tools, ways to work, ways to think as best as I can. And my purpose is to make sure that at the end of the day, this would remain within the local structure. Maybe in the future, these people will join larger or international NGOs. But I think this is our duty to communicate and transmit these know-how. We are fortunate here in Europe to benefit from great training, and every time we are in contact with other structures which did not have this opportunity, I think it's a good thing to transmit or to convey these skills. Any other comment, questions, testimonies from the audience? Maybe I could just add to what has been said by Romeo, the dialogue between public powers and civil society. In some countries, this is non-existent or very problematic. In other countries, however, even though it might be difficult, it is still possible. For example, with the ministry, we are always encouraging the NGOs to work with the central government or the decentralized government. We know it is not easy, and I'm sure the GRDR would have many examples. It is not easy to work with the state in some countries where the state does not have many means or is reluctant to work with the CSO, yet we always need to seek to do this. I have many examples of ministries that really changed because a ministry maybe was more open, or an association or organization that knew how to do this and was able to convince a ministry or a minister or service or manager or CEO to work in a particular field or to help local partners. It's not easy indeed. In some places it can be very conflictual and very complicated, and yet for many topics, civil society, local civil society, sometimes with its French or international partners, can really change things, can change the game. So we should never stop doing this and doing advocacy in order to sustain the activities. The CSO are doing a great job in the area of health and education, and we are so glad to be able to support these initiatives. However, if the state does not continue the work, if the state does not include initiatives or continue the work to enlarge the impact of what has been done, it will be an endless well. We could continue for 100 years to take actions here and there, but if the public powers do not follow up and do not take hold of their responsibilities, it could be a shame. So we need to continue to do the work of advocacy. Sometimes some states, some governments take their responsibility and become aware of the work of the CSO and their initiatives and the wonderful work and actions which are doing among the populations, the most vulnerable populations. Yes, this is a battle, but it's something that we need to pursue and to continue as much as we can. as funders or as institutions. This is something that we do, but actors from the civil society should continue to do it as well, and most of them do it. As part of our policy, from state to state, we need to let them know that we're not doing this against their government, that part of our help is going through civil societies, and that we have this partnership approach. Now I want to turn to the GRDR, the fact that you have worked at great lengths with partners in Mauritania. Was it by defect because it was just too complicated to work at a national level, or was it something that was done naturally? Is it still difficult? How did it work? Okay, maybe I could talk about the way that the GRDR was really well rooted and was legitimate, which really helped us to have some historical background and relationship with our actors. We could not just launch a project, a national project, without being rooted in our case, and not have any background with local actors. I think this is important. Coming back to the idea of working with human beings behind projects, you have people who know each other, people who have been sharing for years ideas and projects. So what has been interested is that we have been helping people with issues which are present here and there, such as decentralization from a region to another region. And these are some interesting scales, especially when we're talking about multi-actors. This scale with the PCPA, I don't know how to say this, but this was with a multi-stakeholder partnership. This was something that was obvious to us. It was the method that seemed obvious. It was the open door to implement the multi-stakeholder partnership. The fact that we had these agreements, these covenants for some years, for some 30 years, from city to support decentralization in order to support the emergence of projects or exchanges. I think we have to talk about discussions and exchanges in cooperation, local cooperation project. There is a lot of discovery from both parts, from the French part, discovering a new country, working in cooperation with Mauritania, for example, with Noisy-le-Sec Jeunes, for example, whom you all know. They've been doing these kind of exchanges for the last 20 years. And on both sides, people are learning. So it's really interesting what's really interesting. We are mainly focused on immigration issues, but elected members of Noisy-le-Sec are actually people from Mauritania themselves originally. So in this kind of discussions, this is where we are seeing this partnership dimension and how to do partnership. This scale was very interesting and important to us. In the same way for the region center, just to end with the example of Noisy-le-Sec, it's important to talk, very briefly, we have to conclude now, just to talk about partnership between governments and CSO. You may have people with multiple roles, and these are important actors in our work, mainly because there are many, for example, actors who are also elected members or heads of associations, members of parliaments, who have great flexibility because they came from CSO originally. There are some great examples. And when Olivier was saying that NGOs or CSO are schools, yes, and I have some small experience over 2 years. But as I was following this multi-stakeholder partnership program, I could see how some people were really growing. People were elected members in a municipality or local authority, and coming back to Mauritania, for example, they really challenged the Minister of Youth regarding immigration. And these are beautiful examples which show that it is open, it's flexible.
Thank you, Flora. To conclude, the ministry is going through a consultation phase with the civil society to see how the ministry is supporting civil society here and there, and we should produce a document by the end of the year. I would like to extend my warmest thanks to our participants, our panelists, and my colleague Romain Daniel, who had the idea of this panel. Thank you very much for being here. Let's keep in touch, and I'm sure we will learn a great deal from the rest of this forum. We will try to persevere. We try to be as honest as possible, share our concerns, our hopes, and how we can work better together. Thank you, and have all a very good evening.